And good evening and welcome to the April 23rd meeting of the Murfreesboro City School Board. We're glad to have those of you that are with us tonight here and those of you that are watching it from home. We're glad to have you as well. But at this time, we're going to ask you to please stand as we have two students, Samantha Stamper, a second grade student from John Pittard, and Brendan Russell, a fourth grader from Scales Elementary School, to lead us in our pledge, followed then by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now our moment of silence. Thank you.
We have to say who that little girl is. Mr. Vaughn, may I say something before Wilson Sharp leaves? I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that the little girl that did the pledge is Wilson Sharp's granddaughter. And Wilson was a longtime employee of Murfreesboro City Schools. I had the privilege of working with him at Reeves Rogers, and Pittard. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, well, you have, board members, you have seen the agenda. I'd like to have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. To have a second.
Second.
Mr. Ballard, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. All right, communications.
Good evening. We've got quite a few communications, so bear with me tonight. We want to first start out by congratulating Bradley Academy for receiving a $5,000 Tennessee STEM Innovation Mini Grant, which was sponsored by TVA, BVI, and Murfreesboro Electric. I know in your agenda it says that was Black Fox, but it was actually Bradley. We want to give a big thanks and shout out to the third grade teacher, Abby Sanders, for writing the grant. The grant will fund an augmented reality sandbox at Bradley, so they're very excited to receive that $5,000. Also, on the same day, Mitchell Nilsson received $5,000 for Catching Wind and Other Alarming Ideas, and it was written by Robin Trowbridge. So congratulations to both of those teachers and those schools for receiving that extra dollars. We want to also congratulate Kim Frank for being selected to participate in Brain Frame, How to Talk Development on June 4th and 5th at the Lentz Public Health Center in Nashville. This is the next level of training for building strong brains. Congratulations to Discovery School for making it to the next round and becoming a STEM school. The Tennessee STEM Innovation Network visited Discovery School campus in March, and I think those announcements will be made in the upcoming few weeks. Congratulations to Mitchell Nilsson for being the Murfreesboro City School winner in the Lightning Reading Club Challenge. This is a challenge that is through the Blue Raider Athletic Association. Mitchell Nilsson will receive a total of 237 books for all ages who completed the challenge. Members of the Siegel running team participated in the Special Kids Race on Saturday, March 9th. Siegel had a first, second, and third place finisher in the boys' 5K, a second place in the girls' 5K, and a second place overall in the women's 5K, and a second place men's finisher in the 10K. So very proud of those students in that running club. It's a very active club. Mitchell Nilsson would like to thank Sinette P. and Rita Ash and other partners at Parks Realty for sponsoring students on the 6th grade environmental field trip to Land Between the Lakes. Also, Champions on Broad Street for hosting the 6th graders for lunch and a tour. M&S alumni also to be thanked is Butch Campbell and Alan Farley for their recent donations to the school library. That was done in memory of their fellow alumnus, Dr. Tom Johns. Murfreesboro City Schools wishes to acknowledge the donation of school supplies from approximately 300 students from across the state that recently attended the 72nd Tennessee 4-H Congress here in Murfreesboro. Over 2,000 items were donated, and as part of their service project, These items are being sorted now and placed in our teacher's closet for all of our future teachers to use. We're also proud to announce that we now have a certified playground inspector. Congratulations to Michael Chapman for successfully completing the NRPA Certified Playground Safety Inspector exam. Also, congratulations to John Pittard Elementary. They were the big winners as far as grants go this month. They received a grant for $9,350 from the Nashville Predators for a Predators Jumbotron, which is an 86-inch active touch smartboard. They will be receiving that check in a couple of weeks at Bridgestone, so congratulations to Pittard for that one. Also, our nutrition department, congratulations to them and a huge shout out to them for a very successful state and federal audit review. And I did say a state and federal audit review, so they've certainly had lots of people in their offices lately. It was a rigorous week-long process, and we want to thank the schools that participated as well as Sandy Shealy for her leadership in this process. We also want to acknowledge the Murfreesboro City Librarians who led their student school teams in the book battle. Students shared their knowledge in a rigorous competition in front of a packed house of parents, teachers, and the community at Hobgood. So we are very proud of those teachers that really led this process. It was a year-long process leading up to the book battle. The children did great. Our judges did a fabulous job. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. LaRoche, for sitting through the whole judging process. We want to also congratulate Discovery on their first place finish in that book battle. Many thanks to the teachers and students who participated in the middle grades math competition at MTSU on April 11th. Congratulations to Overall Creek's sixth grader that placed fourth, with two students placing in the top 20 of all sixth grade competitors. Also, congratulations to Don Barch, principal of Overall Creek. Don was given the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network's Excellence in STEM Leadership Award. The award recognizes a school-level, district, or regional leader with a proven track record of developing effective STEM programs. So once again, we want to congratulate Mr. Barch on that. Murfreesboro City Schools, the Murfreesboro Police Department, and City TV developed a stop video concerning vehicles not passing buses that are offloading children. This is a PSA-type video, and it has not only been shared by hundreds of people around here, but also by the National Association of Pupil Transportation Services. So we consider that a big success. Finally, I want to make sure that this Saturday, you know you're invited to John Pittard Elementary for the Middle Tennessee Science Olympiad, and that will be going on most of the day, so stop by and see our kiddos at work. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Carissa Dotson for the rest of the communication.
One more communication. Recently, our social work team was honored by the Department of Children's Service child abuse ceremony, and those social workers do amazing work. And so there is chosen by that organization a group that they really feel make a difference in the community, and so our social work team was chosen for that. So shout out to our social workers.
Yeah. And of course, tonight was our reception for our art show. The art that's on display right now in the Rotunda is amazing. It will be moving over to MTSU for their art show next week. Lisa?
Good evening, Board. I know after last fall we had some conversations about reading standards and reading curriculum, and I understand that last week during budget meeting there were some more questions. So Mr. Marlin and Dr. Gilbert asked me to come and answer any questions. And so I thought I would kick it off by taking a look at the scopes that have been developed before we met in the fall and ones that have been developed since then. And so I think you have copies of all those, correct? And so what you have in front of you is the first thing you have to understand as a district is that we've moved to a STEAM model. And with STEAM, the planning becomes very integrated. We don't have reading planning, social studies, science, and math. We do that planning all together through units. So did you have a question, Mr. Campbell? Did you get it?
I'm just trying to determine what you're referring to that we have.
Is that the right one?
There are three
There's several
documents.
things.
Three documents.
Yes, three documents. And so One of those where you see the big quarter one down the side, these are the brand new documents that we just created. And we actually are working with coaches this week to begin training and planning our rollout for the district. So with STEAM planning, you start with the science standards. So this quarter one that you're looking at would be a 9-week unit. So in that 9 weeks, they would cover all of those science and social studies standards, and we would integrate the reading and math into that as well. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a math block and a reading block. It means that everything that we're teaching comes through that science standard and that STEAM unit that's developed. So one of the things that has rolled out of the state consistently, and they're starting to provide unit plans, everything's moving to that unit planning model. So as a district, I believe in December, we began rolling out STEAM as a district, looking at how we can begin creating these unit plans for 9 weeks. So as you look across these, what you can see is they're planned out as to which standards they're going to teach. Now, where the teacher freedom and the teacher creativity and the teacher planning comes in is how do these standards fit together? What connections can you find between all of these standards? So an example would be in second grade, they're looking at push and pull in science. They're looking at all different kinds of the movement standards. And if you look, there are significant people across the year that they have to learn. So we pulled people like Benjamin Franklin, Wilma Rudolph, Jackie Robinson, because of their movement. And so you can study the physical science of their movement and read about them through reading. And another example in the fourth quarter, you don't have to look, but we're doing earth and space science in the fourth quarter. So the person that they're studying is Neil Armstrong. So when we wrote these scopes, we were really careful to be sure that there were good, viable connections that could be made between the science and social studies. Now, one of the big things that we want to make sure of, though, is that we're sticking with the standards. And so in a lot of these plannings, I'll say, what's the reading standard? Because we don't want to get off on doing fun things. We really want to be sure that we're being standards-based. So if we're reading about Wilma Rudolph, we want to be sure that it's complex enough for that grade level. We want to be sure that we are hitting the reading standards. If we're working on Wilma Rudolph, we may be looking at key ideas and main idea and key details. And so that would be standard 2. So we would want to be sure that we were asking students questions and developing tasks that would meet that standard and not just talking about Wilma Rudolph. So it's a pretty complex but very authentic type of learning. So with that, we also have a couple coaches here as well and principals if you have questions about their planning. I'm in the schools a lot, so hopefully I can answer them, but if not, I may call on one of them. So
I think one thing I'd like you to do for the general public, tell them what STEAM is.
STEAM is integration. It's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so with a STEAM unit, you integrate all of those subjects together so that students really have a good learning experience. And it's hands-on. You always begin with some type of lab, some kind of engagement so that we get students engaged in the learning. And so instead of talking about push and pull, we show them push and pull. They may build something that pushes and pulls. So we go beyond teaching just the concept, but having them do it. So the students are doing science. And that's the big shift in the science standards. And so in understanding all of that, realizing over the last 2 years, we've changed math, reading, science changed this year, and social studies changes next year. So since we didn't test social studies this year, we went ahead and practiced the new standards so that we would have a head start of knowing what those standards look like. So one of the big shifts in social studies is some of the grade level content has completely moved. So for example, Civil War has been 5th grade forever. Now Civil War has moved to 4th grade. And so, but 5th grade goes back and teaches Tennessee during the Civil War. All of Tennessee history is in 5th grade. So there's been some pretty significant changes in those standards, and they're way more rigorous. When we met yesterday morning, we being the coaches, we looked at those standards and how different the verbs are, how they've moved from those very low level to construct an argument, to analyze the differences. So the verbs are very different, and what students are expected to do are very different. And so to get all of these standards in at the depth they have to be in, we've taken the STEAM approach.
Ms. Barton?
What you have here is fabulous. That's my concern is not what they would use to make the units. My concern is there's really no way to know. There's only one of you. There's only one principal in every school, one coach in every school. There's no way to know that every classroom in the city is doing activities or things in such a way that the standards are, they have to be able to perform in a certain way on the test. Like it or not, they do. And that means they have to have a certain understanding of the standard to be able to perform that way. So, and I think it's very feasible that a teacher that's been teaching a while may think that, or he may think that they're doing that, and they may not be. I mean, that's my problem with it, is that I feel like we're becoming curriculum writers, and I'm not sure that's, most teachers aren't able to do that. And I say that having been a teacher for 15 years. And I hear concerns from teachers that feel they're doing it, but they don't feel comfortable. They're not sure about what they're doing. Is it enough? Is it going to be deep enough for the kids to perform well, to show what they know? And I know you can't answer that question, Carissa, but that's I didn't want anybody to think I have any problem with any of this. I mean, great, but that's not what I have a problem with.
Well, and it's a viable question that we all ask ourselves, like, what training do we need to be sure that people have? One of the things with the new science standards, I mean, I've been vulnerable the last 2 days saying I'm not as clear on those. And, I'm the reading coordinator, but if we're integrating, we all have to know each piece. And so, we're really working hard to understand those to the depth and asking each other lots of questions. And that has come up. What about teachers that are struggling to implement? Because sometimes you can write a really great unit and you walk in to 3 different classrooms and it looks 3 different ways. And I mean, that was the case when we had reading curriculum anyway. And so you could see it done well and see it, but it is a viable question. But we have really started working on how are we going to roll this out in a way that we can make sure that all of our children have the best instruction. Because one of the things with reading, and we had this discussion last time, was how with this standards changed before the reading adoption, which is next year. And so we were expected to implement those standards the last 2 years, last year and this year, with basically no curriculum or no basal, because ours is not aligned at all. It was aligned to the old standards, and we did very well with it. And so when What Works, Clearinghouse evaluated programs, ours was one that was read across the board, which meant that it had no connection to our standards. So we basically had to do, now we still use some of the stories out of it that are appropriate and that sort of thing, but we had to write that curriculum because we can't just go buy something, and we did go from a 1 to a 3 in reading, which I was very excited about. I want to see a 5 this year, but it was hard and it's time consuming. But what has happened is people know the reading standards a lot better than they know some of the, because we focused on it. We have had that intense focus on reading, and we saw that movement. So what we've got to make sure is that we have that intense focus across the subjects. But it is a viable question.
Mr. Summers?
Thank you. I have a question about this document, and I'm going to show my lack of understanding. I don't understand anything on this page
Which one?
at all, except that it says second grade quarter 1 foundational.
Okay, so I want you to keep turning.
It says FL.SC.6. This looks like something I need to give to Wes because he worked at Nissan.
That's foundation literacy, sentence composition, standard 6, A through C. But let me help you there. If you flip back to behind the 4th quarter, that's the overview document for our teachers that really know those standards well. But we also have in-depth documents that really lay out those standards so you can see what that FLSC6 is.
So these first few pages really don't mean much to us.
Yes, those are the standards that those are the standard numbers that we're teaching during that week. And so those standards
It's not broken out in English. this is computer talk or something like.
No, it's just the standard numbers, and our
I get it.
teachers know these standard numbers,
They
especially
know them by heart.
especially the
Or,
comprehensive
I get it.
I don't know if they know them by
I
heart.
just, no, I'm sure
Yeah.
they don't. I just I thought, what am I reading? And then I thought maybe I'm missing something that I need to go back to the standards. The question that I want to ask, if I wanted to see STEAM in action, you would recommend that I would go to, I'm going to pull a school out of the Mitchell Nielsen and sit in a class the whole day, or go from class? How would that work if I wanted to see that in action, so that I can be more of a cheerleader for what we know that we're doing? Murfreesboro City Schools is actually the best system,
I agree.
probably in the world.
I agree.
We have a really, really good system. But if I wanted to be more of a cheerleader, you would recommend that I would go to one of the schools. Tell me what I would do.
So most schools at this point, we've just begun the process. So our model at this point is Overall Creek. They've been doing this for 5 years, and so they've really perfected what it looks like. So all of us, including principals, coaches, district office, have gone there to observe their planning, observe what's going on in the classroom, to talk about the student engagement we see, to talk about the engineering process we see. But at this point, people have started, we're all at different places. Everyone's planning their first unit for next year during May, so that they'll have that first unit planning done. During May, they're going to have the time to do that, and EA coverage or subs. And so, I would suggest at this point, Overall Creek is the only one that's implementing 100%. Would you agree?
I think Discovery, too. And I
Discovery.
think Pittard has done some pretty amazing work. Mitchell Nelson has some spots. I think Hobgood has some spots.
And a
Bradley.
Black Fox fifth grade's
Black Fox,
implementing.
yeah.
And there's a lot of places where it's really starting to roll. And one of the things that Don Barch talked to us about is how it starts at almost a grassroots and then grows.
Northfield. The good part is that we don't have to develop the model. They were originally developing the model, but what's happened is schools are coming to us to see that in now. So that's the good part. The state is definitely moving toward STEM, definitely moving toward unit planning. In fact, I would be surprised if part of the team evaluation this next year is not unit planning. They've already said that they're going to move to that. So it's a matter of being able to get in all the standards that you've got to get in the amount of time. And the other part is the student engagement and the applied learning. So if you remember when we started talking about math tasks, that was kind of the first step of that whole thing, because really a math task is a more in-depth, more student engagement, more student talk, more student learning. And so really the whole STEM, and particularly the way we're doing it, is more of an expansion of that whole process.
Thank you.
John?
I wanted to ask if the district is providing any of the resources for language arts to the teachers, because there's two things that I hear over and over, and being a teacher myself, that does burn out, is having to research and pull in these IRAs. And so do you all provide, like the Wilma Rudolph, do you all provide the resources and say, here's a reading story that's going to pull in with the science?
Yes, we have some that are already developed. We have some that with new standards we're having to develop. But yesterday, looking at our standards, we had our experts at each grade level. We broke into groups, and we went into a Padlet. If you know what Padlet is, it's my new favorite thing. And we will share those resources with teacher. We thought of all the literature we could think of that would match these, informational texts that we knew of. And so we've really started collecting banks of these stories or informational texts for the teachers. Now, we do have to create what we do with those stories.
Okay. So when the language arts adoption rolls around in 2020, we're going to be back to kind of square one, but
Well, and we'll see what rolls out. The criteria, from what I understand, many publishing companies are like, forget it. It's too much, because they're very stringent on what they're requiring from the publishing companies to even be accepted for review. and hopefully they'll come out with something great. But I know Tennessee's requiring that these programs match 90% of the standards. That's a task.
Now, repeat that again for me, what you're saying about the publishing companies and the textbooks.
Big publishing companies are going for it, but some of the smaller publishing companies that typically go for these reviews for the state to be considered for curriculum aren't even attempting for Tennessee because the criteria is so stringent.
Is that happening in other states as well?
I'm not sure.
I think Tennessee created our own standards, and that's really what's caused such a headache for everybody.
Yeah, and so even when we're pulling from next-gen science standards, there are some changes between second and third that, some of those materials that are available don't really, we have to be careful about knowing our standards and knowing what Tennessee expects our students to learn.
Ms. Barton?
Well, and then again, the email you sent today, we had social studies adoption in the budget, and now it's not. I go back to what Becky said. We're wearing teachers out. I don't know a better way to say it. Even if they believe in it, I'm not saying we're wearing them out. And I'd like to see us, at least if this is what we're going to do, we need to go to something where a lot of that legwork is done for them. And I'm sorry, Carissa, because I know who's probably going to do part of the legwork. It's you. But I'm just saying, you know what I mean? And like I said, feeling insecure about what they pulled. And do they have the right reading levels for reading pieces? They need to have the right, I don't know. I still feel like there are a lot of them that are struggling, and they don't want to say it, but they are.
Mr. Ballard?
Thank you, Carissa, for coming in and helping to straighten this out for us. But the question I would have, first of all, you're giving us standards that you're working toward or working from. Where are those standards? Where do you get those standards? They're not, do they come from the state, or do they come from?
Yes, they're from
so
the
the state develops, the state's developing the standards, and then that comes down to the schools to follow.
And so we pay close attention to our standards and then how those standards are assessed at the end of the year, so that as we're writing the tasks and writing the things for the kids to do, we want to be sure that we're also preparing them for the end-of-year test. Because we don't want to only prepare them for the end-of-year test, but we have to prepare them
Okay, so this
to see
lines
the
up
items
with,
they're going to see.
This lines up with testing then.
Well, it's instruction. The test just determines if you taught the standards to the states the way the state requires us to.
And then my last point or question is that this is in lieu of a textbook then?
Yes.
So there's no textbook, there's going to this. And the teachers are able to go to the website or wherever to pull up these and say, okay, today or this week we're going to do this. There's a schedule for that, first, second, third quarter. And
yes, so they use their PLC time for planning around those standards that are to be taught. They work with their coach and their team in collaboration. And so it's not one teacher trying to put together a whole lesson. But they do have PLCs, and a lot of principals are now, since we're shifting our focus to STEAM, not really shifting our focus, but shifting our process towards STEAM, that there are several principals, and I think all three of them are, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but are giving their teachers days with coverage to come in and help get some of this rolling. Because the hard part is getting ahead. And what we're finding is if people can get ahead, it's not quite as stressful. But I'm not going to stand here and say it's not stressful, because it is. And so they are having to find those resources, and the coaches help a lot with vetting that. The gifted coordinators may come in and help plan. I come in and help plan. There are days I just go sit in planning all day and try to help people as much as I can with the resources and making sure that we are teaching the standard to the depth, because you can think you are and you're not.
Which was my point earlier.
Correct, yes.
That's what I'm worried about.
Mm-hmm.
A whole grade level could think that they're teaching the standard to the depth, and they may not be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I want it to be good. I love the system. I would love nothing more than to see us get fabulous scores at the end of this year. I just worry because I think with so many teachers feeling insecure, it has to affect their performance.
Well, I think one thing that hurt was the fact that we don't have a reading. There's not a reading program out there that's going to be the magic fix right now until the state comes through. And I think that one thing that we have to watch is whether, when we do get the reading curriculum, are they moving toward whole language in K-1-2? Because we still have to have those foundations. So I think if we had had a reading curriculum and if we didn't have the time stretch that we have to have, then yes, we would have moved this way. I think we would have had to move this way because I think the state's moving this way. But I think the thing that drove it was the reading curriculum not being there.
So you think there's a good chance we'll have a reading curriculum next year when they adopt?
Well, you know, they've told you all and they've told us that they look at 90% that alignment.
Want to have 90%.
But I'm questioning that because Tennessee wrote its own standards. And so, as Carissa said, the big textbook companies, I don't see them coming in with that. Now, if they do, great. If we can look at those books and say, fine, because there'll be certainly resources. But I think we'll just have to wait and see.
So has Tennessee put themselves behind the 8 ball with publishers?
Yes.
Because Tennessee wrote their own standards, and that's not what everybody else is doing?
It's not nationwide standards, and no textbook lines up with just one state.
And so what you end up
Hallelujah
with,
for
it's
the
a big
Department.
job to write this
Yeah.
curriculum, and they're not going to take the time to do it if they're not going to get a big bang across several states.
Yes, sir.
I guess my question is the standards that we're dealing with when they got rewritten, is that a holdover from previous?
What happened was Common Core, when it came in, and the state had gone full force into Common Core, and then when politics got involved with it, and I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, but that's what happened. And so then they said, okay, we're going to write our own standards. Well, they changed them enough that it's an issue. Now, they've done the same kind of thing a little bit with science because they haven't adopted what's called the next generation, the next gen standards exactly, but it's not as bad as the reading. But if you talk to school districts across the state, reading has been an issue. And so I think it really, as Carissa said, I think the process that the teachers have set in place, that we've set in place as far as developing what the teachers needed for reading, showed up with the test scores when we got a higher score there than we did with the content area that did have textbook. So it all depends on what the standards are. And as we found today, it all depends on the time test, too.
Yes.
So it's testing in Tennessee needs to be, pardon the pun, but reassessed, because it is punitive. I don't think it is in any way anymore really helping as far as driving what students need to learn.
I would dare not say that there are too many people in public education that would disagree with that statement.
Right.
It's been that way for a long time.
Yeah.
What about the case assessment? I haven't heard much about that as far as, from the feedback on that, does it look as if we're on the right track? Are schools that are...
Yes, I can speak to reading from our last assessment. It looks like we're on track. Very much so. I can't speak for math. I've looked at it a little bit, but not to the level I've looked at reading. And many of our schools hit single AMO in, when did we take it? March. So many of our schools had already hit their single AMO, which is our achievement goal, in March, and some had even met their double. And so, and we saw a lot of growth from our first test to our second test in reading. So if this is predictive, and this is our first year, other districts have said it is, we should meet our achievement goals in reading.
Well, as far as, I know you can't see anything but math, but as far as math and science go with the schools that are full in STEAM or STEM, improvement or growth, I mean, you know.
Last year the schools, as far as the ones that have moved to STEM, what we saw, and again, remember that it's basically the ones that had really moved to the task work, because it's just an extension there. But we had 3 schools, I believe it was 3 schools that were within 0.3 of a point of being reward schools, and all of those schools had moved to the task and moved to the STEM work. I think we still have some work to do in math, but I think that Ms. Klisch is certainly working on that. But as far as what we saw from the math scores, some of the highest math scores were in those, if not the highest math scores were in those schools.
Right, that was from last year's testing, right? I meant CASE for this year. Does CASE not test math?
It does.
Okay.
We took one this year.
Have you looked at that, Cindy?
I'm just curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Cindy, but I'm just curious.
Oh, why not? She can come on up here.
That's right, if you get 2, she gets 2.
It's a little fuzzier with math because we actually have taken 2 tests this year. We do the iReady diagnostic, and when that was given, we were right on track. The last assessment was in December, so our district numbers looked really good. This is the first year that iReady is claiming they are predictive on TN Ready. Okay, so that's their claim. So that's the single AMO district-wide. CASE was lower. So we kind of, like I said to administrators that I've met with, is you've got to look at, you're somewhere in between the 2. You have 2 different assessments giving you 2 different so it just looks different this time. Next year, I think we'll have a clearer picture of which one is giving us the most accurate information.
Thanks.
And I would say for reading, our change from the first test to the second test are schools that have started integrating. I'm not sure that I can say that we have full STEAM models except in probably a couple of schools. Overall, Discovery, I'm not even sure Discovery was full STEAM model at that point. But the growth that I saw in reading, I would attribute to integrating with task. And so this is just the next step from that. But looking at last year's data, our schools that really moved to integration, not without the STEAM model, who did reading tasks that were integrated with social studies and science, that was our first step. Those schools performed well. That did integrate.
Any other questions? Thank you, ma'am, very much.
Thank you, Carissa.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions that you all have, since I know we do have some coaches here, any questions that you all have of them about the planning process? I think we've talked about that. If we haven't, I can certainly fill you in on that. I would encourage you to go watch the planning process in the schools and encourage you to talk to some parents and some teachers that have shifted from the previous kind of planning to what we're doing now about the changes that they've seen. I think that's important.
All right, next item, gifted program.
I'm going to take the first part of that because I wanted to review what I had given you all, and then Leah, if they have questions. We really started looking at this gifted program, and this is a guess. I should have gone back and looked at it in fall of 2014. There was a time when Murfreesboro City had a gifted pull-out program that a lot of us attended, as a matter of fact, called Merit, that went back for years, and then that program was kind of done away with. And so what we started looking at was really when we started looking at each individual child, and if you think about what we do as far as intervention, if we want to look at each individual child, then we also need to look at the gifted children and the high achievers, and that was certainly an interest of this particular board and also the district at that time. So basically we're talking about 2 different groups. We're talking about the gifted students that require IEPs and really fall under special ed with this particular state. And then we're also talking about the Scholars Program, which is something that's relatively new. And these are the students that really outperform the grade level, but they're not exceptional, but yet there's something there that they may need extra. In fall of 2014, when the gifted program, we began looking at it, there were 58 gifted students with IEPs, and this represented 0.73% of the student population. Today, we have 178 students with IEPs. That represents 1.98 of the student population, and that's almost 2%. Now, really, when you look at what should be the population, is between 3 and 5%, so we still have some work to do. We still have some work to do with our underrepresented groups. But in addition to the gifted students, there are 276 scholars. They receive services. Not enough services, but they receive services. So we're now looking at about 5% of the student population that are receiving additional services, whereas when the program started in 2014, there were 0.73. Each of the gifted specialists serves 4 of the schools. Heather Knox serves Northfield, John Pittard Reeves, and Black Fox. Leah Barch serves Bradley, Overall, Hobgood, and Cason. And Tamara Cosby serves Irma Siegel, Discovery, Mitchell Nelson, and Scales. And I think I've given you a little bit of what they do. They do attend all IEP meetings that might have to do with gifted. This is work that was previously done by the resource teachers, but the gifted specialists having knowledge in that field where not necessarily your resource teachers have knowledge, but they don't have the in-depth knowledge that someone who has the certification for gifted instruction has. This year, they set in on 241 IEP meetings that are occurring from September to May. Reevals are required every 3 years. IEPs are required annually. They also are responsible for 4 progress reports sent home to parents. These are required by the state. They administer NWEA. This is an assessment that we're administering to our gifted, but also that our other teachers and principals are able to look at it to see how their gifted students are going, and it kind of can let them know how their school's going. This is done 3 times a year and allows us to make sure that the gifted students and the high achievers are still growing. You know about the Jennings and Rebecca Jones Gifted Academy. Currently, there are 35 in the current academy, 112 that have been through it. This is funded by the Jennings and Rebecca Jones Foundation. It was begun, the model was begun in partnership with MTSU, and MTSU still works with us. We've had both teachers from Oak Ridge and teachers from Bedford County that have visited the Gifted Academy and been part of it because of state recommendation. They also now are working with clustering. This was begun several years ago here in the district, but they sit down with principals and help them with clustering students together. Gifted students are the one group of students who do better if they are in a classroom where you have several of those gifted students together, and so they work with that. And then professional development, you've already heard a little bit about. Scholars, I'll let Leah certainly talk about that, but then the Invention Convention is something that they have actually asked them this year to work with, and so they worked with that in many of the schools and also the Science Olympiad and robotics. The referral process, again, I sent you, but that is what we have as far as the gifted program. And the way we view it, it really is a program that is as important as, and personnel that would be as important as what you would find as far as the importance of psychologists or librarians or any other person who might be there for serving a particular purpose. So, Leah, I'm going to let you answer any questions or explain that further. But I wanted to go over that because they did receive this. I did send them this.
So what questions do you have? Yeah.
You mentioned that the children in the larger group met with a gifted coordinator, isn't that what y'all call maybe once a month?
We would like, that's part of the reason why we need more support, is that our teachers need more support. For example, they might want to look at student work with us, but we are in IEP meetings or we're pulled for the IEP services, and there's not a lot of time, there's not any extra time to pull those students and work with those students or to sit down and work with the teachers. Like when we do the NWEA data, setting down and going over that data, it gives us, we have a dashboard, a data dashboard, where we can pull up and see exactly what that child needs, what they did well on, what they need work on, and help teacher programming or programming for the student or teacher planning if we have that time to sit down. And knowing the characteristics and how gifted learners learn, that they want that. You know, when we first started the program, it was almost the opposite. It was like begging to get to go in and help them. Now they want it, but we can't get to them because we're pulled in so many different directions with IEP meetings or IEP services, and we run those during intervention times. So when I go to a school, when I'm pulling my kids, and I will say this too, at some of our schools where we have underrepresented populations, we're pulling those scholars at the same time. We're pulling them as much as we can. Because research supports that practice. But we want to do that across the board. But I forgot what I was saying. But anyway, yeah.
So then how often are the children that are gifted? Yeah, IEP
It depends
gifted.
on their IEP. An IEP team gets together. They talk about the needs of the child and what the child, what kind of service the child would need.
Right.
So that is decided by that IEP team. And when we run that through intervention, so for example, if I have students that have an IEP, that have IEP services in their IEP, when I go to that school on a Friday, I start during intervention time and I run during the kindergarten, the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth grade class with class. So in addition to that, I'm planning for those classes, for those students. If I have an IEP meeting, then I don't get the services during that time. But because I'm only at that school for that short time, making up that IEP service time is difficult. But I have to do the IEP meeting. So sometimes what we end up doing is we end up combining grade levels. Well, then that messes up with specific what these children need or that child needs. And then also they're missing Tier 1 instruction because we're not able to pull them during Tier 1 or during intervention. So, and I think that too, like, I know when we started this program, our program is very different. When you talk about gifted in a lot of districts, it's very, very different. We have several mottos, I guess. You're gifted all day, every day, not just time when you're pulled out, right? So we want that support to provide support for that all day, every day. And another thing that I think that we look at from our gifted services is the top performers, your fourth and fifth quintile performers. If we do our program right, we increase student achievement for our highest performing kids, even the ones that aren't identified, because our teachers are learning these strategies because they're having a group of 4 or 5 kids that they know if they want growth on their achievement scores, they have to do practice in the classroom this way or allow them to research on their own or, et cetera. So they're using those strategies for other kids, and other kids are bubbling up and benefiting. And even the NWEA data, it's so cool watching this naturally progress, because if your highest achievers have missed a concept, so they take this test and it says fractions, they don't have fractions, then the teachers are using that to pre-assess their gen ed grade level across the school, not just that one classroom, but they're using that to discuss achievement for the whole grade. They pre-assess or do an assessment for the grade level to see, oh, the whole grade level is missing this. So when we have the opportunity to work with the teachers and dig in here and analyze it and find these things and say, hey, the reason why this kid isn't growing is because they are taking this literal. We're going to need to give them it this way and phrase it this way. They apply it to more than just those gifted kids, but it requires that sit down side by side, that co-teaching, that co-planning, and monitoring.
Ms. Barch, I'm really interested in the referral process as far as how kids are identified, even to be referred to be screened or tested. There's a lot of data out there that shows that a lot of subgroups have historically fallen through the cracks there and not been identified by teachers as needing to be screened for giftedness. Where does that fit into the work that you all do as far as training teachers to know who they should be referring?
And that's a national problem. That's not just a problem, as you mentioned, that's like across the board. And so we do a lot. First of all, awareness is the number one thing. We've got to increase awareness of that. Dr. Gilbert recently wrote and got approved tassel credit for our principals, and we just spent a day or half a day talking to them. And one of our sayings that we want people to start to look at is we've got to find potential. Stop looking at the end performance as whether they are or aren't, but look at potential, students who demonstrate potential, and nurture that potential. So awareness is one of the things we do. Also, another best practice is local norms. So when you look at data in some of our schools, if we use the 95th percentile, we're never going to find those students for various reasons. So we use local norms, and that's best practice in the field of gifted.
What does that mean?
So the top 3 in the rank, if their score was 88th percentile, but they're the top ranked person, then they get points for advanced achievement. And referrals, this is one thing I just love about our program. And like Dr. Gilbert said, I've had people, this Department of Education from Mississippi emailed. Like, because it serves kids, it's not about an elite club. It's about who needs support to increase your performance. And you see that we've had 500 referrals. In our referral process, in order to qualify, or we would be serving everyone, you have to have a qualification, right? But 500 referrals, because we've talked to our teachers and our principals. If you think there could be potential, refer them. You don't have to, I think sometimes people were afraid to refer because what if they weren't? We want to switch that to what if they are? So refer them. And then we also have so there's like that fear of referring, take that away. If you think they might be, they need to be on our radar. And then we also have a potential scholars too. And what that is if you are almost have the points, then we watch you. We put you in as a potential scholar, and we nurture you, and we watch your performance and try to increase that child's performance and see what happens, instead of just saying, no, you don't qualify, in our schools where we use local norms. Mm-hmm.
I want to ask questions about the underrepresented groups.
Mm-hmm.
Work to be done, making sure we're adequate. Who's in that group?
Okay, so it would be minorities and poverty. Any of those.
What about English language learners?
Mm-hmm.
And
there's different characteristics, and we just I think that I can pretend all day long that I don't have cultural bias, but as much as I don't want to have it, I do. And by admitting that and looking at that, I open myself up to look for things and constantly reevaluating my perception to make sure that I am looking. We know that we need to provide rich environments and ways that these kids can bubble up, giving them opportunity for leadership, giving them opportunity for developing their creativity, helping with their vocabulary. Through STEAM, it's crazy watching our kids that you probably would think, oh, they will struggle with building what did we build? A Doodlebot. And they come out with the best one. So that those opportunities, when we combine that environment of hands-on learning, they are rising to the top because we've taken away that ceiling. We've stopped looking at the end performance, and we've said, show us what you can do in any way. And then they shine, they rise. It's so cool. And then everybody gets to have praise for their abilities instead of what we classify as, yep, your IQ is there. You can be gifted in a lot of different ways.
Because I think we've talked before about students being gifted in one area, maybe not every area,
right,
but still serving them in that gifted population,
yes.
Because it just may not be their thing.
Right.
Sorry, math. They could be gifted in other areas, and we still focus on that and kind of nurture that, correct?
Right, their strength. We want to focus on their strength. We support because it's best practice. We don't want to take a mathematician and make them a strong mathematician, but then they're struggling in reading. That's not the end goal. But if they live, breathe, eat, drink math, then that's where they're motivated to learn. So we fuel that, feed it, but then we're coming back with that progress monitoring and go, whoo, you're reading here? We have got to do some work here. Feed, work.
But I see how STEAM can work with that.
It is
It's integrating
amazing
that.
for gifted learners.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all learners, really.
Mr. Ballard?
You touched, Leah, thank you so much. You touched on earlier I guess I'll call it ratio, the teachers versus the students. And I know we're looking at the budget this year for gifted teachers or instructors, and then we're also looking for some English second language. You know, when it comes down to budget, which would you, where do you cut?
You know,
Fair question.
another thing in our little people, we say we can meet everybody's needs. We don't have to choose. So we find a way to use what we have and resources that we have, and I can't answer that question.
But you must.
But right now, there are 4 of you, is that right?
There are 4 of us. Well, there's 3 gifted specialists, and only the 3 of us can serve in an IEP meeting because of our endorsement on our license, our teaching license. Becky Campbell is, she is our assistant, and she's more like our manager because she schedules all of those 241 meetings. She's calling the parents and scheduling. She's sending the paperwork to the teachers. If we had to do that in addition, oh my goodness. And she's testing all of those kids. So there's multiple areas of testing, and some of them we have to do, but like the test of achievement or our cognitive screener, she does for us. As of last week, she had 404 students on her testing log. I can't even believe that she's gotten that much done, and she hand scores those tests. They're like a Scantron machine of, I don't even know how many are on there. 150 bubbles? 100? I don't know. And she hand scores them and has created a document where she puts it in and I can't even, she amazes me, the workload that she puts out. But one thing that we're kind of worried about is, like, we have some kids that have been referred for too long. The process is taking too long because if I go, like, for example, we didn't have school on Friday. That means that I haven't been in that school for 2 weeks by the time I get back. And unfortunately, when I go, and then this week was testing, so I don't see them. And then when I go the next time, I have 3 IEPs. So I've got to figure out how to get that service time in for those IEP kids. I need to see my scholars, and I have those IEPs I got to take care of. And oh, by the way, I have a stack of referrals I've got to catch up on. So those kids, if I have to prioritize, my IEPs are legal. That comes, that's first priority because that's special education services. So then these kids that are waiting, it's just, you can't get them. So you can't put them in the scholars program in a timely fashion.
What would you say is the average length of time between initial referral and acceptance or decline?
Well, that kind of depends too, because Becky is so efficient. So she's gotten to where now she'll even check our mailboxes, and if a permission to screen is back, and she's pulling a group of first graders, she'll go ahead and pull that first grader with them. But like, let's say that, because she takes and she keeps this track of this long Excel document of all of these kids, and she'll wait until she gets a group of first graders at Hobgate, or a group, so that she can, when she goes, she can group test several instead of going for one student. Sometimes it has to be one, but so it depends. Sometimes somebody will get lucky, and she had a group of first graders to test, and their permission slip came back, so they get tested quickly. But sometimes, like, I don't think we have anybody from the beginning of the year now, unless like their parents didn't return permission for a while. But, you know, it's not uncommon for it to be 3 months, and that's just too long.
I agree. And Ms. Barton?
I want us to have a gifted program. I'm not opposed to that. I never have been. For me, it's more of a choice about using the money there as opposed to using the money somewhere else. And I totally get that y'all got a lot going on, and you probably do need somebody else. But I have to look at, too, the percentage of students that you're serving as opposed to the percentage of students that we have that are ELL in the system. And I know that the email, again today, mentioned something about a part-time person. You know, I don't know, is it going to be somebody that's truly dedicated to ELL, or are they going to do 2 or 3 other things too, or, you know, and I get it. I understand you're trying to squeeze blood out of a turnip. I totally get that. But I just feel like that, you know, we've got other areas that we could use more. I mean, we've had 2 instructional technology coaches forever, no matter how many schools we've had, and they're supposed to work with all teachers. And I think they could do a lot more if there was one more of them. And that's a huge part of STEAM, is technology. So, you know, there are a lot of other things that I see that we could put that towards. It's not that I want to take it away from you. It's that I think that we have to look for the greater good.
So I think a couple of things about that. I think there's no way I can justify a full-time ELL coach. What I can do is justify certainly a part-time ELL coach. As far as what we're adding with ELL, we're adding basically 3 teachers, plus we're adding a person who would come in part-time, half-time. And I am looking at a person, hopefully, that would have that experience. I don't know whether they'll do it or not, but I think that's really important. As far as the gifted, really, I look at that as I said, we've got a new school coming online, so I'm looking at that just like I would look at a psychologist or I would look at anybody else. So that's the way I'm approaching that. As far as the technology, I think you'll find if you look at what the technology department, so Scott's department, what they're doing with schools, they certainly have picked up a lot of what you would have seen an innovative technology department do. So they are the ones that are doing the robots. They are the ones that are introducing a lot of the sandbox, for example. They're the ones that are introducing a lot of the robotics and some of those things. The 2 instructional coaches are 2, but you're seeing additional people because of the way that our technology department is operating, because of their talents and interests, that are operating different than what you would have. They no longer are just a fixed department. So what I've given you is a budget, I think, that's realistic, and I think when you look at the needs of the district, I think it's what the district needs at this point in time with the money we have. And I think that's, as far as the textbooks, the reason we're going with science and taking a look at whether we get science or whether we get science textbooks or whether we get resources and labs. That's in there now to be decided, but that's the reason I switched the money, is because there is no testing for social studies. So I want to see what we can do with social studies, but I think right now science is the critical one. And if we're not going to be tested, then let's look at science. But I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to be a textbook. That may be something else. But at least the money is there for that decision to be made. So when I look at the budget, as far as what the district needs, as far as what I've heard from the different departments, as far as what I've heard from the folks in the field, I think you've got a realistic budget. Now, if I had another $3 million, that would be great, but I don't. So knowing what I hear, knowing what I see, knowing where the state's going, I think what you have is a realistic budget. It gives us enough to handle the fund balance that we have to have, which is 3%. And if the council comes through with the technology, I think we'll be okay. There's not any fluff in it. But I think what we're asking, as far as the additional 3 ELL teachers, and now we have money for the coach, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't want that person doing administration. I don't want that person being evaluative. I want that person working with the teachers and the resources that the teachers need, and as far as people resources. So that's kind of where we are with the budget, and I feel strongly that we need that the ELL teachers. I feel strongly we need that part-time coach. I feel strongly we need the money for the textbooks, for the resources for science. I feel strongly that we need the gifted just as surely as we need the extra special ed teachers and the extra psychologists and the extra librarian. So that's what my role has to be here.
How will the psychologists be dedicated? Will they be dedicated to areas of town, or how is that? I know now they're kind of assigned to schools, so I didn't know if that was going to change, adding another
They
one.
are. We have, as far as psychologists, we would have 9 psychologists. So we're looking at, they have 2 schools right now. They have 2 schools each, and then we have a system-wide person who works, and then we have a person who's a psychologist, Jess Graham, that does the RTI coordinating. They are not. There was one time when they were looking at behavior. They still do that some, but because we have the behavior specialists now, you won't find them. Before, we didn't have the behavior specialists, and we really didn't have the social workers. So the psychologists were the people who we had to depend on for a whole lot of things, not just the testing, but also the behavior. And now we don't have to do that as much.
I noticed we added a social worker too, didn't we?
Right.
Which is,
Well, actually, we picked up the 3 ACEs coordinators.
I thought there was an extra position in addition to that. I may be wrong. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I don't think so. Now, we did pick up a guidance counselor, you know.
Well, I figured that for the
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, so that will give us 17 guidance counselors, which is a good number. So you're looking at the 17 guidance counselors plus, as far as social emotional support, plus your social workers, plus your behavior specialists. So I feel good about what's happened in the district over the last few years as far as the social emotional support. I think we have some work to do. I think whenever you introduce something new, it can swing too far, and so I think we have to come back with some of the behavior, and that's something that Kim Frank and I have been talking about, because we need to make sure that, while I don't want to I don't want to treat a particular student unfairly as far as behavior. On the other hand, there have to be consequences to behavior too. And so I think now we're going to sit down with principals and really look at behavior plans and make sure that across the system that we're consistent with what we're deciding about behavior. Because I think that's something we haven't had time to do, but I think it's time to do that now.
Any other questions? Okay. Next item on the agenda. Is consent items. We have a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Who was that? Ms. Goff? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. Reports and information. Personnel report. Any questions?
I had one.
Mr. Ballard?
I noticed that we have a 1-year LOA. Is that how? We have employees that can take a 1-year LOA.
Right, right.
And they leave a position, they come back to the same position, or they can.
Right, and usually that, well, there are lots of reasons for that. It can be as simple, and we try to be as generous with that as we can. So it can vary from everything from an illness to wanting to be with family, to maternity leave, to I had one just a couple of days ago where she said, my children are old enough now that I'd really like to take a leave, so and be with them for a year and then come back. I had another one that just had a child and would like to spend time with that child. So we're pretty liberal in this district for that because that's important.
Do they maintain seniority? I mean,
They'll come back
or is that an extra year of seniority when they come back they've earned?
They would not lose any of their years.
Okay, so it's just a matter of your approval for.
Right.
taking a leave of absence, and then whether we've got the manpower to
Right,
backfill that position.
yeah. And that hasn't been a problem. I think that's, I think with the profession as it is, and with, I think that the district, and that I need to be as liberal as I can. Now, if it becomes an issue, then that's something else, and we'll look at it. But at this point, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the personnel report? I do have a motion to approve the report as printed.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Amanda, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, enrollment.
The enrollment report is that we're up 130 students. Over the beginning of the year, we're at 8,985. Our pupil-teacher ratio for the whole regular ed school system is 20.10, which is still excellent. And our attendance is back up around 95%, so we're doing well in that area. The next report ends on May 1st, so it's just kind of sequence is a little out of order right now based on when the enrollment numbers stop.
We continue to grow.
K through 2 looks good. I mean, there are no real outliers there like there are in 3 through 6, and I know how that is, but it's nice to see K through 2 numbers that low.
I think if we were to go outside of that right now, we would ask for an exception rather than trying to find a teacher.
Mm-hmm. All right, have a motion to approve the personnel report.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. All right. Revenue and expenditure report.
Okay, you had 2 reports this time. If you don't mind, we'll do the one that ends on March 31st, since the other one we've already passed over at February. It's the 75% mark of the school year. Our net income is $9,538,000. Last year at the same time, we were at $7,970,000. So we have a better cash flow position right now than we did last year at this time, which is always good news. Our sales tax collections are up $552,000 over last year, but our property tax collections are down $587,000. I'm hoping that's just a timing issue, because in the February report we were actually up. So I'm just hoping it's timing on when we get the report from the county as far as how when the taxes were collected. Revenue then is down a little bit because of that property tax collection. We're at 78.9% of revenue collected, which is still good for the 75% mark. And last year at this time we were at 81%. On the expenditure side, we're at 66%, and last year at this time we were at 65.5%. So we're right in the right ballpark. But overall, we seem to be tracking the way we need to be tracking.
Okay. Questions? Have a motion to approve the revenue report.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Settles. Have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And there is none. Thank you. All right, action items.
Okay, your action item tonight is approval of the budget. As you know, you all met for a pretty extended period of time last Wednesday night, and we presented the budget to you. This council is in the process of looking at budgets right now, and I believe that they plan to have, I think all the budget, Mr. Shackler, the budgets, you're looking at the middle of May.
15.
Trying to, okay.
15.
So it's been a little bit of a different process this year. I'm going to go over just a few things for the public. One of the things that has changed in the budget this year is the way that some of the reporting categories had to be done by the state. And so if someone were to look at our budget, they would see some of the categories change. For example, voluntary pre-K was at one time not reported in the budget the way it is now, so that there appears to be an increase there. There is not. That money really is just flow through, so you would see the same amount of money in the revenues as you would in the expenses. We were estimating that we would need about $2.2 million for the Salem personnel. We think that we'll probably get some from BEP on that, so we're looking at that. That was consideration for the budget. I'm recommending a 3% raise. The governor has talked about a 2.5% raise. I think for us to be competitive, we need that 3% raise across the board. I think that's extremely important. Money is not what holds people in the school district, but it certainly does make a difference when, especially the initial people or others, they can go wherever they want to. So teachers today, I think the fallacy that a lot of people have is that teaching is a profession that's not in demand. It absolutely is a profession that's in demand, and we are in a competitive business now. And so I think that it's totally fair to give our folks at least a 3% raise. Also, we had the retirement that increased by 0.17% in the budget. In addition to the people that we would have that would be new related to Salem, we have a full-time speech person moving from contract position to a full-time position, 5 special ed EAs, 10 additional regular ed teachers, 9 additional regular ed EAs, 2 new CDC classes. These are our comprehensive development classes, which are our special needs children, those classes. Another BEST class, which is a behavior class, an additional psychologist, the 3 social workers that we are picking up from the ACES grant because we feel like that their work has been so important to us, 3 additional ESL teachers, 1 additional nurse, and an additional ESL coach. We also are needing to move to digital records. We are responsible for keeping the records, it seems like forever, and so we need to get those digitized, so this will start that process. Also, every few years there have to be new psychology protocols for the psychologists. This is that year, and so there's always an increase there. We're finding the case benchmark test. We've been looking for a long time for a test that would be predictive, and that's something I would love to see at some point, the state fund, but I see no movement on that whatsoever. So we believe that the case benchmark is going to be predictive, and at least we're doing enough of it this year to find out. Also, the internet, we are needing to, as we add a new school, as we add devices, we are needing to really take a look at the internet, and so the budget is based on approximately 200 new students. We are building this budget on $1.3 million that we'll be asking from the city, which I think is extremely reasonable because of the new school and because of the new students that we will be serving. So what you have before you as far as the changes from when we were last together on Wednesday night, and again, I will let the public know that the board did spend, I guess, over 4 hours probably Wednesday night in addition to other questions and emails. But the major changes are that, as you know, we have to have 3%, at least 3% in reserves. That is by the state requirement, or they will not pass the budget. When you last looked at the budget, we would, with the way it was presented, we would have been out of compliance by $201,000. When last you looked at it, we had some questions still from the state, and we still have some questions from the state and won't know exactly what we're getting, but we think this is our best bet. And so what I have added is I've added an ELL coach that is now in line 116 of your budget in section 71100. And after finding out that we do not have testing in social studies, I'm asking that we use $190,000 in the textbook line for science, and that will get us in balance with a leftover of Mr. Anderson, do you have that, or it's more than it was when I wrote the board?
47.
Thank you. So questions that you have?
Mr. Settles?
We don't have anything in our budget that says we're closing any of our pre-Ks, right?
No.
I heard a rumor, and I knew
No.
it wasn't the case.
No, that's not the case. Now, what is happening is Oakland Court is moving because of what they are doing over at Oakland Court as far as the demolition of that area. And so the estimate from Mr. Rowe was that it would probably be about December, so we're going ahead and moving those students. We're still looking at where that's going to happen. We're not there yet.
That's what I thought.
Right. No, we're not moving toward closing any of our pre-Ks. That work's too important.
I have a question. It's more procedural than anything, though.
Okay.
Do we think that city council is always going to, from now on, ask for the budget earlier than, because if that's the case, I'd like to see the whole procedure move up. I feel like we didn't have enough time to really look at it and ask questions of other people, not just you all, but other people. So that's my only comment. If we could have more time in the future, if they're going to ask for it this early.
I think the uniqueness of the school district is that, and I think it is different than other departments because so much of ours is funded by the state. So you're looking at a relatively small part that is supplemented by the city. And yes, I agree with you. We need to move it up. And if we're going to need, so that's going to make a difference because I think we were already looking at scheduling and had already started the process when we found out that we were needing to move it up. And I think council is wanting it moved up because if they are trying, what I've seen is they're trying to get a much bigger picture of the budget and to get as much transparency as they can and to try to deal with the growth that they've seen in the city but yet maintain the services. So I understand they're moving it up. It just makes it difficult on us because the BEP is not coming in until 2 weeks ago. I guess we got the estimate, and that's the vast majority of our funding. The other part is with your federal funding, we didn't get that until actually, we had already started on the budget process, and I remember last year we didn't get the federal cuts or the amounts, and there were cuts in Title I, until we had already taken it to the board, and they had looked at it, and then we got those cuts. So I agree with you. We need to move it up. It's important. It'll be difficult, and I think we're just going to have to take our best guess, but I think it'll at least allow you all to start the discussion earlier. And so I think we'll have a better picture, too. I think council will have a better picture after they go through this budget season of how early they need to move that. And it really, when boards look at budget, depends on the funding bodies and where they are, because you'll have some districts will go ahead and pass their budget, their board, before the funding body even starts to talk about it. But I agree with you. I'm not comfortable with that.
Other questions pertaining to the budget? All right, do I have a motion to approve the budget as printed and revised as we received today and tonight?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I so move.
Thank you, Mr. Settles. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Roll call vote, please, ma'am.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes.
Ms. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl?
Yes.
Mr. LaRoche?
Yes.
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Settles?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
7 yes.
Budget has been presented, has been approved by this body. Let's hope that we get approval by the next body.
Mr. Campbell, if I could thank the principals and the teachers and all of the people that had input on this, because it was a challenge, and the department heads. And also I want to thank the board, particularly for the raise that you're proposing for our employees. I think that's really important. And I think the support that is in this budget as far as the social emotional support and the other support does make a difference with our children. And so I think now it's up to us to how we use that.
I think the 3% raise for our employees is the very best part of the budget.
I agree.
And very well needed and deserved, and more needed and more is deserved.
Right.
But can't get blood out of that turnip.
All you can get is turnip juice.
Any other business coming before the board? There's one more item of business I would like, if you will, board members, if you'll meet me right down here at this table. Just a brief moment.
Just for a moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Murfreesboro City School Board, we want to thank you as tomorrow is Administrative Professional Day, Secretary of State and all that. And we want to thank you very much for the hard work that you do and the support that you give us and for putting up for all seven of us. Because sometimes, you know, it can get a trouble. So in that manner, we'd like to present this to you as you certainly are.
Exactly right. That's right.
Taxes, sales of property.
Somebody didn't see it. Oh.
We're having
Yeah, they're closing the. People over here.
All righty.
Something.
What in the world?
I know. It's the Oakland court.
I bet it was. I bet it was.
I know.